Please join me in allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Greet your neighbors. Our invitation today will be given by Major Connie Higgins.
Let's pray together. Dear Heavenly Father, the creator and sustainer of all that is and ever will be, accept our thanks today for this day and all its blessings that it's given to us. We ask that you guide and direct our club and all that we say and do. Grant that each of us may feel our responsibility to Rotary, to our community, to our country, and indeed to all peoples. Help us to always look for opportunities to serve you, Lord. Bless our fellowship today and bless the food that was prepared for us to the nourishment of our bodies. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Connie. Welcome back, everybody. We'll do a double duty today here on the PowerPoint, so bear with me a second. Okay, a couple of quick announcements today. One is we're wrapping up our Worcester Rotary apparel sale. So the two young ladies from Interact, Layla and Emma, are here today. So if you have any order forms with you, or if you have any questions for them, please see them after the meeting. Also, just a reminder that on March 28th, our regular meeting on March 28th, we're going to be doing Years of Service Awards and Paul Harris Fellows. So put that date on your calendar. We have a couple special 50-year service recognitions to give out at that meeting. Also, I sent out an email this morning. Many of you may have seen it. I got an email from the president of the Rotary Club of Canton. They're doing a reverse raffle for raising funds for Ukraine. They actually had one of the Rotarians from Ukraine visited them via Zoom last week. And so they had the idea that they quickly pulled together this fundraiser. They're selling these reverse raffle tickets. They're $50 a piece. If you're interested, let me know, but it's a quick turnaround. So let me know by Thursday. I've already received some responses from some of you, and then I'll coordinate with them on the purchase of those tickets. Also, last week, as I was scrolling through Facebook, I came across this picture of a young, strapping Tony Biggio. Tony, I'm not even sure if you saw this because it was on social media, so I'm not sure. So I have to admit, when I first saw it, my heart skipped a bit, beat for a moment, and then I saw that his son Gus had posted this for Tony's birthday last week, and gave him a pre-obituary. So I won't read the whole thing. If you have a chance, you're on Facebook to read that. But I will read the introduction here. My dad, Anthony John Tony Biggio, waded out into the Great Duck Marsh in the sky on date to be determined. He was date to be determined years old and cradled his trusty Browning automatic shotgun in his arms, had a bag of decoys slung over his shoulder, and was accompanied by the souls of black Labradors that always tromped through the mud with him. And I learned a lot about Tony in the pre-obituary. It was a neat idea. I learned that he grew up in Steubenville, that his mother was friends with Dean Martin, that he cleaned up after his father's racing pigeons, that he played football at Denison University, and that the story of his eventual landing in Worcester, Ohio. So if you get a chance to look at that, I would encourage you to do so. We're certainly happy that Tony ended up here in Worcester, Ohio. Another comment.
There are a few minor tweaks, but overall, life is very good.
And it also reminded me of a story. Tony's been very supportive of me, as many of the members have been this year, offering advice and counsel. So a couple of months ago, Tony was mentioning to me, you know, this is great that you're doing this year as Rotary president. It'll look good on your resume. And then he paused for a minute, looking at me and said, well, it'll look good in your obituary. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Secretary Land and the Secretary's report.
Thank you, President Terry. We get to start by recognizing one of our cooks, Shannon Bennett. Shannon, are you back there to come forward? Thank you. We are recognizing Shannon today, one of our cooks. She's been with us 16 years, clear back in the Y days. So remember standing in the Y. Shannon has accepted a full-time position at the OSU Worcester campus. And Shannon, we wish you well, and you have an open invitation to come back any Monday. Thank you so much. We would also have a great opportunity to welcome 2 new members and give them their red badges. First, Mary Beth Burns is the president of Wayne Economic Development Council and was sponsored by Don Noble. And Natalie Ramsire, brand engagement specialist, sponsored by past president, past secretary, and her dad, Tim Swift. I'm going to have you stay standing because I'm going to have some others stand with you. If all of you who have or had a family member in Rotary, please stand. Son, dad, brother, sister. That's quite, thank you. Quite an impressive lot. Great, thank you. We have several guests. Reinhard Klett has the traveling microphone, and he'll start over with Ted Bogner. And before Ted introduces his guest, I'll introduce mine. My father Doyle is with me today. So thank you.
I do have a guest. He's a pain, but he's a gift. My guest today is Dave Nolan.
Please welcome my 2 guests, John Cook and Carl Wells, to my associates.
Melanie Garcia.
Hi, my guest today is Mary Schantz. She is the daughter of our speaker today, Vic Schantz. She's also my distant cousin, and she works in information services at the Village Network.
We have a very special guest from the College of Worcester, Ryan, and he's going to actually introduce himself.
Good evening for all. It's a pleasure talking with all of you. My name is Ryan. I'm international student and Rotary director from the Club of São Paulo, Brazil. So it's a pleasure to be here and finally meet all of you. I feel at home with this overwhelming interaction. Thank you.
We have 3 announcements. Ron Holtman, Katie Kolgeman, and Tom Rumbaugh.
Several interesting and noteworthy things happened last week in our Rotary world. Unfortunately, Terry already took the first one, explaining about that old codger over here at this table. He did not mention that it was Tony's 81st birthday. I think we should give him a round of applause. And if you really want to know Tony, come with us when we put out flags. I won't say that. Also last week, the Davy Tree Company was at our Oak Hill Park project site, removing invasive species from the area. Our 3-acre parcel, which is located north of the trail and adjoins Founders Row, is now ready for planting. Finally, one of our Rotarians has offered a dollar-for-dollar match beginning this week for Rotarian contributions to our park project. The match is good up to $5,000. With this incentive, you now have the opportunity to double your money in supporting our project. Not all of us will have our obituaries presented while we're still living in the special way that Gus honored his dad this past week. However, you can preserve your legacy at Oak Hill Park by buying a tree in honor of someone. The person does not have to be a Rotarian, for $500, or you can contribute any other amount toward the project. All gifts received after today will be counted toward the match. And I want to make one note for clarity. Due to market volatility, neither Bitcoin nor rubles in any denomination will count toward the match. Forms for naming the trees are located on the table in the lobby. Make a check to the Worcester Rotary Foundation, give it to one of the committee members, an officer of the club, or send it to the foundation at 2363 Eagle Pass in Worcester. As the weather warms into spring, we expect that we will be setting a date toward the end of March or early April for the planting of the 50 new trees. So the time for you to pledge is now. Thank you.
Sticking with the theme of old, we will not be printing a Rotary directory anymore. Now, many of you like the paper directory, so I do have paper copies of what can be found online. It still has all the information, it's just not in a pretty bound, documented piece of literature. These are here for anyone who wants a paper copy. However, there is a Club Runner app that you can download on your smartphone, Android or Apple. And if anyone needs help doing this, I'm happy to help you. But you can go into your Club Runner app, you click members, and it has everyone's name. You can actually click on the phone and it will call them right away from your phone. So right now, someone's phone's ringing, Greg's. But that's how cool it is. It has all their information. So if you need help downloading the Club Runner app, let me know and I will help you. If your information is incorrect on this, it's because your information is incorrect in Club Runner, and we will also help you correct that.
Good afternoon. It's all about the flags. As you know, the flag season is coming up pretty quickly, and we still have a great big pile of flags that need to gone through to repair and to switch out with new flags and so forth. We're probably about halfway through what we will need to start the season, so we need to finish strong. I'm going to have a special flag maintenance day this Wednesday at 4 o'clock, 4 to 6 p.m. Feel free to come for the whole 2 hours or just part of it. I won't turn anybody away. The next service opportunity for flag maintenance is Saturday, March 26th from 9 to 12. So we're going to try Saturday maintenance day. So any questions, stop by and anytime.
All right, well, we're going to move right along in the program here today. So at this time, I'll call up Vince Marion. He's one of our new members, and Vince is going to share a little bit of information about himself with us today. Welcome to all of our guests. I hope you enjoyed today's program and the Fellowship of Worcester Rotary. Vince.
Thank you, Terry. Good afternoon. Before I talk about how I got into the exciting world of planning and zoning, just wanted to give you a little bit of information about myself. As Terry said, my name is Vince Marion. For those of you who have not had the pleasure of meeting one-on-one yet, and I look forward to getting to know each and every one of you. My wife Nancy and I have been married for 31 years. She is a professor and department chair at the University of Akron, where she has been there her full career, 32 years. She and I have two sons. Jacob, our oldest, actually lives here in the city of Worcester, and our youngest is working on his graduate degree at Columbia University in New York. Outside interests, my wife and I enjoy a lot of bicycle riding, and we're heavily involved with Shriners International, and I'm a member of the local chapter here in Akron at Tadmore. I was a previous member of the Louisville Rotary, so familiar with the being a Rotarian. Never had to do this before, but was a member of the Rotary in Louisville. So how did I end up in what I said earlier is the exciting world of planning and zoning? So let's face it, most people hate calling their local zoning office. They'd rather have a tooth extracted than call and find out what they can and cannot do with their land, or what the process is of trying to improve their property or their building. In 1990, I graduated from the University of Akron, my first master's degree in political science with a specialization in international trade. From there, I ended up doing some consulting work for about 2 years. Primarily, my consultants were in the Stark County area, where I was advising and doing research for companies on countries where they were looking at making investment. Got ingrained in the community. My wife and I moved into the Stark County, North Canton area because of the proximity to the University of Akron, as well as where I was heading south of the Akron-Canton Airport. Got ingrained in the community of which we resided. An opportunity came along that the administrator of the township that I was living in became vacant. I made an application just to explore the opportunity there, and was eventually hired as the township administrator. In the 4.5 years I was there, I extremely enjoyed the planning and zoning aspects of being somewhat of a city manager. Plain Township is about 40,000 residents, a home rule township, which means they have the powers to make some rules that some other townships may not have the ability to do. But during that, as I said, the planning and zoning aspect of the position was what really intrigued me, and everything else became a distraction. This pesky employment issues and union negotiations and bickering between township trustees, and it was just something I wasn't enjoying anymore. And so in the early 2000s, I was talking with some folks that resided in the Alliance area, and they were beginning what they were calling a transformation of transforming a community where the business community was actually driving what was being changed in the city of Alliance. And the opportunity came along, and they were looking for the position of director of development. It wasn't a position they had held or had before. I applied for that, and it was eventually hired as their first director of development for the city, where I had planned on staying for what I thought was going to be my entire career. Upon arriving in Alliance, I found that their zoning code was almost 35 years old. There was no comprehensive plan. and there was no map of how the city was going to progress. Over the next few years, we did a complete rewrite of the zoning code, underwent the comprehensive planning program, and implemented a new strategic plan for growth. Really enjoyed the 14 years I was there in Alliance, really enjoyed that aspect of the career. And it was during this time that I thought, hey, if something were to happen in Alliance, or if I wanted to move on, that I thought maybe I should probably go back and get the credentials for planning and zoning to go on with the experience that I was gaining. So I ended up going back to graduate school at night and getting a Master's of Public Administration from the University of Akron with a specialization in planning and zoning and land use development. It was also during this time that a good friend of mine who was on the North Canton Board of Education chose to not seek re-election and asked if I would be interested in becoming a member of the North Canton School Board. Anybody here ever been a member of a school board or past member of a school board? Not a very thankful job. In the 4 years that I served, and I chose not to run for re-election, we had undergone an issue with our treasurer where we actually she ended up going to prison for stealing as well as theft in office. We had to hire a superintendent, and we had to hire a head football coach. Now, of all three of those topics, what do you think caused the phone to ring the most? A football coach. More people were upset with the choice that we hired for football coach than they were for the superintendent and or the treasurer going to prison. So it was during this same time I chose to go back to graduate school, and I decided, well, you know what, after this 4 years of school, being on the school board, it felt like 10. And I decided not to seek re-election. And actually my wife decided to run in my place, where she ended up serving for 14 years. The difference was when I ran unopposed. When she ran, she had a campaign every 4 years with 7 or 8 candidates, and she never let me forget that. She never lets me forget that. So while I was in Alliance, like I said, 14 years, the then city manager for the city of Louisville we had discussions. They were hiring in the position of director of development, one that they had not had filled in quite some time. And from those discussions, I ended up going from Alliance to Louisville, where I thought I would be for the next 10 to 15 years. And it was during this time my oldest ended up moving to Worcester, and he works for the College of Worcester after getting his master's at Kent State. And when my wife and I were visiting him often, helping him move in and spending time here in the city, particularly in the downtown area, I commented, I said, boy, this city really has a lot going on. And this would be a wonderful place as the next step in my career. And the position became open, and lo and behold, I was fortunate enough to be chosen for the position. Hopefully, it'll be the last move. That is my intention. Planning and zoning. Why planning and zoning? As I said earlier, it's not what most people will consider a very exciting, a very fun topic. But there are really 2 aspects to the job. The first is the planning. And during that process, you get to work with all the stakeholders in the community, residents, landowners, major institutions like the chamber, colleges, hospitals, landowners, and develop a plan and a map of what the community is going to look like in the future. Now, you have a very good comprehensive plan in place. We are planning to do an update to that next year. So we'll be engaging in that process. And then the best part is in the implementing of that program and seeing results as the community improves, which you have seen over the last, from what I'm gathering, 10 to 15 years in the planning and the implementation of what has occurred here in the city. And then the other aspect of that is zoning, and that's the police action or the enforcement of the code that was established as a result of the planning. Not the most exciting part, not the conversations I enjoy having the most when you tell a property owner that you can't do that, or here is the steps you have to take in order to engage in that. But our approach, and my approach particularly into implementing the zoning code, is we want to try and let the property owners, the building owners, the landowners do what they want. We want to see improvement. We want to see investment made. We want to see progress being made. But we also want to see that done according to the plan. We want to see it done according to the codes and the regulations that were established through all that process, and make sure that it's done in a consistent, fair, and method, so that everybody achieves what they want and the community sees the best results. And none of this occurs in a vacuum. As much as I would love to take credit for everything that happened in the Lions and Louisville, and what I know is going to happen in the city of Worcester in the future, it is not done by one person or one organization or one entity. It is done by everybody working together, pulling together and getting on the same page and implementing that plan. And that is what drives me every day to get up, to see what ends up at the end result.
Thank you, Vince. So we're going to have Greg Barbu come up and introduce today's speaker. Greg, I'm just going to get the PowerPoint shared here.
Thank you, President Terry. It is my pleasure to introduce Vic Schantz, president of the Schantz Organ Company of Orville. 6 years ago, the Daily Record ran an article announcing an open house at Schantz Organ for anyone interested in forming a makers group in Wayne County. The makers movement, which celebrates invention, creativity, curiosity, and hands-on learning, was about 10 years old, and Wayne County was overdue for an organized group. I met Vic at that open house. He was clearly a serious business owner focused on successfully navigating his company through an economy that has sent most manufacturing overseas. And I look forward to hearing the story of Schantz Organ in his presentation today. But I also discovered he was a proficient guitar player, a motorcycle rider, a skilled designer in his own right. The maker movement encourages experimentation in areas outside your expertise. So Vic has also dabbled in electronics, often successfully, but occasionally he has been known to release from his components what is known in the makers movement as the magic smoke. Vic is an active participant in Orville and Wayne County organizations. The number of board memberships and trusteeships are far too many to list here. He earned a Bachelor of Arts in Economics from Ohio State University and completed a graduate program at Cleveland State University in Global Target International Export. Please join me in giving a warm Rotary welcome to Vic Schantz.
I took a look at the Rotary website and was reading a little bit about what it means to be a Rotarian, what the values, principles are of Rotary. And I don't think you could find, if you were looking to epitomize Rotary, I don't think you could find anybody better as an example than Greg Barbu. What he's done in volunteering and helping people in this community is exemplary. So when he called me and asked me to speak today, I was quick to say yes, just because I appreciate getting to know him. I want you to imagine a trench that's a mile wide and a mile deep and stretches from here to Cleveland, 50 miles long, because that is the amount of rock and stone and dirt and volcanic ash that erupted into the Earth's atmosphere in 1815. was the Mount Tambora eruption. We've never had anything like that in human history. Mount St. Helens was a 4, magnitude 4 volcano. This was a magnitude 7. Every time you go up a level, you go up 10 times. 10 times bigger than Mount St. Helens, 20 times, 30 times. This was a 7. It blanketed the earth in a cloud of dust and ash that wouldn't let the sun go through. So for 2 years in Europe and parts of North America, this cloud of ash kept the sun out. There was no summer in the summer of 1816, 1817. You couldn't grow feed for the animals. You couldn't grow crops. There was no food in Europe. In Switzerland particularly, they were hard-hit. And the starvation, the level of starvation and disease in Europe was beyond anything we've ever experienced in this world. Napoleon had been rampaging across Europe from 1800 to 1815. He was finally defeated in 1815 at Waterloo, and everybody thought maybe we could have some return to normalcy. Then the volcano goes off. To understand Schantz Organ Company's history, you have to understand the migration of the Anabaptists to the United States, the Swiss folks who are the precursors of the Mennonite and the Amish surrounding us all here in Wayne and Holmes County. These folks are a huge part of our economy and our community, but they came here almost en masse. The entire population of Anabaptists migrated to the United States in the period from 1815 to 1824. And they came to Lancaster County, they came to Sonneberg, Ohio, they came to Bern, Indiana, they came to Highland, Illinois, because representatives of that church community had come over. You know, 1803, Napoleon has bankrupted Europe and France has no money. So he sells the Louisiana Purchase to the United States. 1/3 of the landmass of the United States in one fell swoop opens up. 1812, in the treaty with the British, they concede all of the Northwest Territory to the United States. Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin. Suddenly, all this territory opens up. And America said, you know, bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Come over here. Because there's no monarchy. We aren't going to tax you to death. Well, at least not back then we were. We're not going to create any problems for you to practice your own religion. You want to earn your own land. You want to have determination of what happens to you. And these people came. 2-week walk from Switzerland to the Netherlands. 2 months in the bottom of a ship to get across the ocean. 2 more months to come across in a Conestoga wagon. And Ohio wasn't this bucolic open farmland. Ohio was like Johnson's Woods, north of Orville, where the old growth original forest was intractable. Animal paths, Indian paths, wagon paths became the means that you came out here. And people came in these hordes, these masses. American microcosm is the Anabaptists and the Hungarians and the Irish and all the other people from Europe who were absolutely unable to live. What did I just do? Did I advance the slide? You hit that, right? Okay. Well, 7 generations back from me, Johannes Schantz, whose wife had died in all of this tragedy, he brought his son Abraham and his wife, and they made that trek all the way across to Ohio in wagons, lived in tents, had to cut down all this mass of trees to make dairy farms. Abraham's son, John A. Schantz, living in the Kidron community, a deacon in the church, had a big dairy farm. He had one son, one child, Abraham J., my great-grandfather. And Abraham was someone who didn't want to be a dairy farmer, but his parents didn't want him to leave the farm. So they hired a cabinet maker from Cleveland to come down to the farm and teach their son cabinet making. And by the time he was 18, he had 5 people working for him, and they were building furniture for people. And he was an inventive sort of a fellow. At a very young age, he took out a patent for what's called a carriage jack. You know, you had to get the buggy up off the ground. You had to take the wheel off. You had to put another wheel on. And he invented this carriage jack. He invented something was called a pneumatic oil can when housewives had to fill the kerosene lamps, no electricity of any kind. To put the kerosene in the lamps, a pneumatic oil can kept the oil from spilling out. He sold that patent at a very young age for about $5,000 in 1877, and that's like $200,000 today. And so he was able to use his ability and his knowledge of making things and inventing things profitably. And one day, a church in the area came to his cabinet shop in Kidron and said, we've got this reed organ, no electricity, no television, no radio, no means to do anything. So people gathered in their parlors and sang to the reed organ or the harmonium. Church brought in their harmonium and said, it doesn't work. Can you fix it? He took it apart and put it back together and said, yeah, I can make these. And that launched his Schantz Organ Company in 1873, building Ohio Beauty brand reed organs, which he came off the farm, got a loan, and started business in Orville making reed organs because he had embraced steam technology, which is one of the biggest revolutionary events in American history. If you could have a boiler fed by coal, making steam, and run a factory with line shafts and belts, you could make reed organs, and you could make them faster and quicker and cheaper than anything that had been available in this country. So he sold thousands of these around the United States because people were entertained at home with reed organs. And he started out in Orville at what's now has been the Wilbert Plant 1. So William Schantz and Bert Cope were the guys who partnered together to create the Wilbert coal stoker, automatic means of feeding a boiler with coal. And William was AJ's first cousin. And I think the story goes that AJ found out that the city of Orville was going to start taxing businesses based on their property. And if you were a Swiss Mennonite and you'd been taxed in Switzerland on everything you ever owned in your life, you weren't much for taxes. So he sold the building to William Schantz and Bert Cope, and he hightailed it outside of Orville in the country and built a new factory so he wouldn't have to pay tax. Now, of course, Orville grew up and surrounded Schantz Organ Company many, many years ago, and we made up for that with lots and lots of taxes paid. But that was the reason that we left this building, which is an example of what steam line shaft technology was. Your boiler was spinning a wheel, and the belts were running line shafts at the ceiling and down to your machinery, and you could make things in a fraction of the time. Gradually, AJ moved on into building what are called tubular pneumatic pipe organs, the next step up from reed organs. This is a church in Canton in 1891, which is one of the first instruments that he became involved in. This is how you transported stuff from the factory down to the nickel plate railroad in Orville. That's my great uncle Edison up there on the top of the wagon. And in this time where steam was making manufacturing going, we still were a long way from electricity and automobiles and all of that. That factory that he went to build is at the corner of Oak and South Walnut Streets in Orville. We're still there today. This is the building he built when he started to move from reed organs into pipe organs. And this is another example. In 1904, our early history was building instruments like this for churches all around Ohio. This pipe organ started out with a water motor. Water inside was pushed down with weight to create air pressure. And in the times before electricity, you either had somebody pumping the pipe organ or you had a water motor to make it work. This is an example of a water motor organ from the early times. Another view of the same organ, what the consoles looked like back then. Another church that we worked with very early was First Baptist Church in Seville, and we were recently called to go up there, take the pipe organ out and bring it back to the factory, completely refurbish it and put it back in. And one of the guys that worked with us for about 55 years in Orville was a fellow by the name of Albert Imhoff. And when we took all the pipe organ components out, we found his graffiti on the wall that he had signed his name being there at that time in 1918. And this is the interior of that pipe organ chamber, you know, the pipes and all of the sound making portions on wind chests that contain air. And his graffiti was buried back against the wall, covered up by all those pipes. It was fun to find it when we took it out. That's a lot of what we do is we take instruments from the 1900s and 1940s and we completely restore them, refurbish them, put them back in the church. This is a photo of A.J. Schantz's sons, Oliver Schantz on the left and Edison Schantz in the middle, and Victor Schantz, my grandfather, on the right. In the 1920s, Leading up to the Depression time, H.A. passed away about 1927, and he had turned the business over to his 3 sons. The war years, when the War Department said you can't have any rubber, lumber, you can't have steel, you can't have metal of any kind, you've got to have all that for the war effort, we survived by building ammunition boxes and blood plasma ambulance boxes for the war effort. This is a view of the folks in Orville at that plant making ammunition boxes at that time. That's my grandfather in the back, or Uncle Ed on the right. And my grandfather struck up a friendship with a man by the name of Ernest Skinner, and he was probably the penultimate pipe organ builder in the world in the 1930s and 1940s. And they got to be friends, and they learned a lot about each other's products, and some of what Schantz did, he copied, some of what Skinner did, we copied, and we came to know and have an affinity for each other's building practices and interests, which turned out to be important later. In the 1950s, we were awarded a contract to build one of the largest pipe organs in the world in a cathedral in Newark, New Jersey. This is the Cathedral of the Sacred Heart, French Gothic building with a huge pipe organ. And we were kind of a fledgling little business coming out of the war. And suddenly the demand for pipe organs just quadrupled, and we had to gear up to be ready for them. And this is a very large cathedral building with a very large pipe organ, and we had to suddenly become a builder that could perform at that level. A lot of people gauge our success based on the size of our trucks. This is what we were doing back in the 1940s to transport things around the country. In the 1960s, this is an example of a pipe organ project in Columbus, Ohio, at Mershon Auditorium at Ohio State. A lot of schools were gearing up to have conservatories and music departments, and they wanted to have pipe organs for training students. Kent State's another example of the same thing. Pipe organs that were happening in the 60s as this post-war era was girding up. And so in the 1960s, the Schantz Organ Company was my father, Bruce Schantz, on the left, and his brother, John Schantz. My grandfather, Victor, there in the middle, and Paul Schantz, who was Oliver's son, my dad's first cousin, and Edison Schantz on the right. And they were engaged in this growth time of church building in America and pipe organ building in America, which was going on at a really fast pace. So one of the things we did in the 60s was create our own pipe shop, where we physically make by hand every pipe that goes into an instrument of ours. And that took a lot of machinery and a lot of dealing and figuring out how to do things. It's my father on the right there handling that, one of those big pipes that went to a project out east. And eventually we got a bigger truck. And this is a view of the Schantz Organ Company in Orville as we expanded on building after building after building. You know, the Swiss Mennonites never borrow money. When you got the cash, you build a building addition, and that's just how you do it. And by the time I graduated from college, we were starting to buy even bigger trucks and more of them. So this is just an example of 1975 as we moved into the 70s, building a lot of instruments all over the world. And I just graduated from college at that time. And the marketing people put this slide in because they love to remind me that I once had hair. I spent several years traveling all over the United States, putting in pipe organs and learning how the instrument worked and how to build it. I want to backtrack for a minute because my great-grandfather, at the time that electricity came about, he leaped again into this huge change in technology and saw its potential. And he took out a patent for the Zephyr electric organ blower company. That's something we still build today. It's a fan, an electric motor and a shaft, and it provides the air pressure for the pipe organ to work. Key component to the product, and he started selling these all over the world. Had quite an active business going on there. And this is a picture of him, 1919, standing on the right in the blower shop with all of the blowers that were made going around. And that's a picture of me on the right in the blower shop today, where we're still selling these products to people all over the country who have a pipe organ that's 60 years old and need a new blower. We custom make them and design them, ship them cast aluminum, smaller size blowers, and very large, multiple horsepower, two-stage blowers. And we are a shop that can rebuild, refurbish, do any kind of blower work on any brand, any type. They ship them to us from around the world, and we rebuild various brands of blowers. This is a picture of the maple tree that used to stand on the corner of Oak and Walnut Street, which was 102 years old, and it was right up the street from where I grew up, just next to the factory. And I played around in this part of the neighborhood all the time, and I really, really hated to see that tree. But disease and rotted out core of a 100-year-old maple tree, we had to take it down last year. That tree is no more, I'm sad to say. Here's the group who make up the company today. I'm the president of the company, and in the middle is Eric Gasteyer, who is the music director for this church, Presbyterian Church. Accomplished organist and designer, and Jeff Dexter on the right, who is music director for the Lutheran Church here in Worcester, and also our sales manager and tonal director. Here's the facility we use today in the factory. Pipe organs are all custom. Every instrument is custom to the building it's in, and we have to have an assembly space where we can take all the component parts of the pipe organ, and those boxes that you see there are what the pipes stand on in groups, controlled by a console of keyboards that you play. And so our facility is set up to build all the wood components and all the metal components, all the blower, console, everything that goes into the instrument is built there, assembled there, and then shipped out. Henry Ford had a mansion in Dearborn, and he had an early example of a home instrument that was used for entertainment back in the 1914 period of time. Henry Ford's pipe organ was, the console was lost, and the museum came and asked us if we would build a replica of the 1914 Este pipe organ that was in that house along with the console, restoring that mansion. And so we did. This is the carving that went into the black walnut console that we built for that museum. We've done a variety of those. Stan Hewitt and other places are all projects that we completed. Pipe organ design is the utilization of 3D design software. Have to have people who can draw in 3D and create design elements to sell to customers. And so 3D renderings allow you to show the customer what the instrument's going to look like in their church before it goes in. It's a big part of our sales effort. And all of that culminates in a variety of different kinds of custom designs and custom pipe organs that we built in the recent past. Most now in a nested manufacturing operation using CNC machinery. A lot of the old line shaft stuff evolved into electricity, which has evolved into the computer revolution, which has evolved into the use of that kind of equipment in making musical instruments. Here's an example of a pipe organ freestanding in a chapel in a university in Pennsylvania. This is one of those Skinner situations where a university in South Dakota had a Skinner instrument. Skinner company had been out of business for many, many years, but they knew that we knew how those components were made, and we did a complete restoration of a 1920 vintage Skinner pipe organ. There's a new organ in Galveston, Texas, Moody Memorial. This is about 100 ranks. This is about as big as they get in a very large church down by the coast in Texas. Another Skinner project, we were involved in the relocation and refurbishment of the 1930 pipe organ at Severance Hall in Cleveland, where we did the complete restoration of the instrument and the reinstallation, new console. Cassavant Company in Canada had a 1920s pipe organ that this church in Minnesota purchased. They wanted us to refurbish it, put it all back together. We did that for them. An example of whether, whatever the brand is, whatever the type, whatever the age, we have to be skilled in all that goes into rebuilding those instruments for customers as they wish. Same thing here. This is Melbourne, Australia. The Hill, Norman and Beard Company in England had built this in the 1920s. This is one of the largest pipe organs in the world. This is 156 ranks of pipe organ components. We had to take it all down, put it in shipping containers, bring it to Orville, refurbish everything, add to it, new blowers, put it all back in containers, take it back, rebuild it here in this 3,000 seat auditorium in Melbourne. which, you know, it's just as part of the job, that's given me the opportunity to go all over the world and see places all over the world, and always come back to Wayne County, because if you've done any of that traveling, we've got it pretty good here, and it's a nice thing. Here's a church in Milwaukee, Catholic church on this is Marquette University campus. Another example of take it all out, bring it all back, completely refurbish everything to make it like new console. And Warner Brothers out in California on Wilshire Boulevard, the Warner Brothers temple is that gold domed huge Jewish temple there, and they have a Kimball organ, a different brand, 1920s. They came to us because they knew we're specialists in rebuilding all these various types and styles of pipe organ. We did a project for them just recently. And sometimes the university comes and they want a freestanding, complete new instrument, everything built by us, designed by us. And that's an example of one type of pipe organ we can do. Another one in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, at a Catholic church. There's a pipe organ in Milwaukee at an Episcopal church that we did recently. This is one of the largest cathedrals in America. This is the Cathedral of Mary Our Queen in Baltimore, where they have this huge, relatively modern type of cathedral. And we had to build two of these consoles, one for the front organ, one for the back. The organ in the back is in this huge balcony area with chambers on either side, and very large pipe organ project, which involved the use over of old pipes from a brand of instrument. The company went out of business in the 1960s. And that's us, that's who we are, that's what we do. And I was supposed to end right now.
Thank you, Victor. You're able to stay a couple minutes afterwards if folks have questions for you. Thank you for giving us a little bit of behind the scenes information and what a rich family history with the Schantz Company. In recognition of your time with us today, I have this rendition of a rotary wheel with our four-way test on the back, and these are made locally by the Village Network.
Wonderful. Laser engraver, great.
Just a quick reminder, next week we will have Captain Jamie Richards, who will be talking about a strategic look at our Wayne County criminal justice system. So we stand adjourned. Rotarians, have a good week. Thank you.